Dr. Hart, good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, Dr. Sylvester. I'm excited to talk about homeopathy today.
I am too because you forget more about it than I know, and I'm eager to learn. I've tried to study everything I can on the interwebs, and much like all of our patients, it's a sea of misinformation. And you always have such a great knack for explaining things intelligently, but in a way that people understand. I have a lot of questions. Can we just jump right in?
Let's do it. So, homeopathy, very simply, homeopathy meaning like cures like, right? Homeo meaning the same. And so this comes from Dr. Samuel Hahnemann in the late 1700s. He was a German physician, a German medical doctor, very dissatisfied, which I'm sure many of us would be if we were back in the 1700s trying to get medical treatment. And so he set out to find something different. And one of the things he figured out was homeopathy, like cures like. It's very misunderstood in modern times. Okay, more people think it's kind of pseudoscience, but there is a scientific process to it. Samuel Hahnemann was very detail oriented. He had a lot of what he called provings, where he would take a substance, give it to a certain amount of people. He was doing early scientific experiments and would see what the results they were. So he would give people a small dose of a poison, right? He probably didn't have an IRB review board in university back then, making sure he did this all legit, but he was doing his best to create detailed experiments. Give them all a small dose of poison, maybe 30 people, and he'd see what would happen to them at that dose. And so then he would write down what the predictable responses were. Okay, all 30 people had chills, all 30 people vomited, 10 people got fevers. And so he would take details of that. And then he would dilute that a certain number of times. They call it potencies in homeopathy. He diluted a certain number of times until he got an effect where that dilution or that homeopathic remedy would then potentially cure those same issues. So could you take that diluted poison and would it help the body clear out what the original poison created? And so then you might say, okay, we know this remedy helps people with vomiting or helps people with toxicity or body aches or et cetera, whatever it was those people got. So he was a very early pioneer in the scientific method and doing these trials for medicine. It's quite impressive, really.
Well, he sounds like some Nazi scientists' experiments or something, but yeah, intentionally poisoning people. But I'm always fascinated. Like, what is the actual mechanism? Like, I get the like begets like, but is this a bioenergetic signature? Is this like a B cell presentation? Like, what's the actual? And is it even understood? Really, like you said, to a modern scientific level, they don't even believe in chi and things
Yeah.
that other cultures have for thousands of years.
So as we dive into what's the current scientific understanding, what's the current scientific support in natural, alternative medicine, complementary medicine, it's important for us to recognize that we can update, we can grow, we can mature, we can evolve, we can see the science and change, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, in alternative and natural medicine, we become dogmatic and almost more idealistic or puritanical or religious and say we got to stick to how the founder made it. But we also want to respect science and say it can be updated. Okay. So, Samuel Hahnemann had his beliefs on how the remedies worked. He didn't really know. Okay. But updated what we see happening and the updated research shows that homeopathic remedies, even though let's take one that's a common one used in everyday homes. It's called roost tox. It's the toxin urushiol oil from poison ivy. Okay. And so that roost tox remedy, you use it for people with rashes, itching, inflammation. Okay. And so what we know is that when we make that homeopathic remedy, there's no more of the roost toxin left in there. There's no more poison ivy left in the remedy. But nuclear magnetic resonance imaging shows that that remedy is distinctly different than plain water. Even if you used the same water to make that remedy, the actual resonance of it, the bioenergetic field of that remedy is different. Okay, the information that remedy now is giving off is different. And then from my understanding at this point, what that does in the body is it's an informational remedy. It's giving the body different information for it to change itself. So whereas a drug or even sometimes an herb has a direct effect on making a chemical change, homeopathy is asking the body to make a different change. When I tell patients, I say, this is informational medicine. We're giving the body a little bit of information to do something different. Now, the leading theory is that mostly works on the extracellular matrix in that fourth phase of water, right? That gel, that easy zone phase of water that's around cells, that's in the arteries. A lot of people maybe don't know that. In our body, water if enters a fourth phase. Okay. And so it forms a organized layer around cells. It forms an organized layer in and around arteries. Okay. When we have illnesses, toxins, viruses, bacterial infections, they disrupt that informational zone. And it's part of what creates all the chaos. Well, that informational zone is really, that water zone is an informational zone where there's communication happening between cells. Homeopathy exerts its effect a lot of times on that extracellular matrix and that water zone, right? Those inclusion zones, those fourth phase of water in the body. And so its effects are subtle because it's just an informational effect. Now, here's where it gets really important. If there's major things disrupting that field, so for instance, if you're already too acidic, if you're already too inflamed, homeopathy is going to have less of an effect because it's a subtle effect. It's an informative. It's like coaching the system, right? If you ever coached a little kid's athletic team, if that kid's in the middle of a freak out, he's having a total meltdown for whatever reason, you're not going to be able to coach him to swing better, right? You got to calm him down and then you can coach him. Homeopathy is the same way. It's to calm the system down and coach it in the right direction, right? If it's too inflamed, it's going to be difficult for the remedy to get its information across. But once it's on its way of doing that, or in combination with other things, then homeopathy works really well. This is also why homeopathy works really well in kids and pediatric patients. They don't have all the junk, right? They're less inflamed, they're less toxic. And so homeopathy works great on these kids.
So, aren't you typically turning to homeopathy to cure an ailment? How do you determine when somebody's too sick to be more likely to respond to that versus, like you said, pediatric medicine for minor things like rashes or sneezing or
Yeah. So if somebody's majorly reactive, they're really reactive, and it's more of like a stress response reaction, they're probably going to be a better case for homeopathy. But if somebody's having major inflammatory responses, they're having asthmatic reactions, histamine, flushing, redness, they've got heat, inflammation, pain coming out with their reactions. They're just down and out and just totally bonked out. They're having major neuropsychiatric symptoms. Those cases may be too inflamed, but somebody who's having more of a stress response, a particular ailment that doesn't necessarily disrupt their total functioning, homeopathy is great for that in its traditional sense. And so this is where we also kind of talk about updating the practice of original homeopathy. Traditional homeopathy used one remedy and one dose, sometimes in one time of a dose, and not in combination. Okay, that's how they used it. Updated, a lot of times we'll use variations of homeopathy. We'll mix them together. We'll maybe use what's called anthroposophical medicine or remedies, which is when we're using different types of homeopathics together to get different effects. Okay, those can be a little better when they are used in somebody who's inflamed, and especially when we're trying to coach the body to do something very particularly. So if I'm trying to elicit and clear up one symptom with homeopathy, I want this to improve nausea. That's going to work out better if they're less inflamed. If I'm trying to give the body a complex coaching mechanism, I want to use homeopathy in conjunction with this herb to try to get the body to push this herb into a different place, right? To use it more in the nerves versus the gut, or in the muscles versus somewhere else. It doesn't typically matter how inflamed they are, because I'm actually asking the homeopathy to kind of work on the herb body interaction. That's an updated version of homeopathy. But in general, if somebody's just really far down the spectrum, their lab scores are all over the place. They've got all the classic signs of inflammation, rubor, dolor, right? Pain, redness, swelling. Those cases are a lot of times, not that they can't respond, they're just not going to be as responsive as someone who's less inflamed.
then there's another layer to this too. What about the throttle ability of the potency? Because they can increase by factors of 10, correct?
Yes, yeah. So you can go. So traditional homeopathy is by factors of 100, 1,000, or a million, and then updated versions, anthroposophical, do factors of 10. So they call that X or C potencies, either 10, by 10 is an X or by 100 is a C. And so updated ones use even smaller ones where the X's. And so you can go, so the general there is if it's a smaller potency, like a 6C, which is a low potency, it's only been diluted 6 times, that's what we would call more stimulatory. It's meant to stimulate a process. Okay. So if I really want to batten something down, I want to get some nausea under control, I want to help a kiddo sleep, I'm trying to use this for pain, I'm going to use a lower potency. If I'm just trying to balance things out, just get some medium, or I'm trying to coax the body to do something like drain a little better, do some drainage, right? So then I might use a medium potency, which we call 30C. Okay, that's a medium potency, just balance things out. If I'm trying to calm things down or work with something really deep, I'll use a higher potency like 200C. And if I'm really trying to work on something maybe deep, genetic, chronic, I might use like a really high potency, like a 1M, right? And do something really deep on that front. And again, I'm using this a little differently than traditional homeopaths. I'm getting this to try to coax the body. So if I'm trying to do some complex detoxification processes, one of the modern versions, really, there's some great author, medical doctor. He sought to really combine Western medicine with homeopathy. He generated a system he called homotoxicology. If there was a medical doctor who's like, I don't know anything about homeopathy, but I'm into it, I want to figure it out, I would go study homotoxicology because it's using it in the same way. How can we coax the body's processes to clear the toxins, clear the infections, versus the curative effects Samuel Hahnemann was trying to do? So he was trying to, if you want to hear somebody who take a really good case history, a traditional homeopath, because they're trying to look at your total picture and see which remedy fits you the best. They call it a constitutional remedy. Which remedy fits you the best and can that cure your situation, right? And that's a great way to do it. I have not seen much success with that with my patients personally or among colleagues. But what I have seen is say, okay, take the totality of what you're dealing with and what remedies then in combination support your body in clearing that. And that's more of the homotoxicology. And he had all these phases and different times and steps and all this great stuff. But the general idea is how can I get your body, how can I coach your body to clear these things? That's where I see a lot of success with homeopathy.
Well, to your point, how do you use in your practice kinesiology to inform both the homeopathic blend itself and possibly the dosing or the strength?
Yeah, so kinesiology, muscle testing, frequency testing, it's a great way to say, okay, we found the way the body reacts, for instance, for like a sample of Roundup, a sample of glyphosate. We find the body goes weak with that. Then we can test different remedies and see do they strengthen the body. So, for instance, with glyphosate, you could use homeopathic glyphosate to try to remedy it, or at least teach the body what to do with it. And sometimes that helps. But more so, I might test homeopathics that support, for instance, the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, the digestive tract in draining and detoxing. So that might be something like Nux vomica, which is great for soothing the digestive tract. That might be something like chelidonium, which is a bitter herb technically, which helps to expel things out of the liver and gallbladder, but we use a homeopathic potency. And I'll muscle test. Does it strengthen the body in dealing with this glyphosate? And if it helps a little, I might try a different potency. I might say, okay, we're trying 6C, let's try 30. And the body says, yeah, I can deal with 30 better. And so we'll use that to inform what remedies are best and what strengths. And it makes a big difference when you can frequency match or muscle test. Your ability to get the right remedy at the right time at the right dosage goes way up. Is it perfect? No, but it makes it much more accurate, and the results, the success go way up in that front.
Are there things that like affect the efficacy of the product or the blend itself, like the substrate that it's in, or the length of time it's been on the shelf, or exposure to light or other EMF, like cell phone, 5G? Because it's such a sensitive signal. Is it also sensitive to degradation or contamination through non-traditional means?
Yeah, so there is a little research on how long will the different substances that make up the homeopathic remedy hold the different frequencies, right? So plain water doesn't hold very long. Like a plain water remedy, just relatively quickly within days or hours will lose its potency. Sugar holds it pretty well. Electrolyte water holds it pretty well. Alcohol holds it really well. Those will hold the potencies longer. sometimes up to years, if not otherwise disrupted, right? And so anything that's a strong field can mess with it. So like sunlight, like you typically, this is also partially why they keep beer bottles, beer and dark bottles and things like that. You don't want the sun to oxidize the materials inside. The same way sun will oxidize the homeopathic remedies. Strong electromagnetic fields, because these are informational remedies, strong EMF fields will disrupt the homeopathic remedies if they're exposed too long, like sitting next to a 5G tower, microwaving it, things like that will disrupt it. Traditionally, they said you didn't want to take it too close to food. You don't want to take it with coffee. You don't want to take it with mint. There's a few things like that. When we tested that across the board, the only thing that seems to have effect on the homeopathic remedies is strong peppermint. Strong peppermint will disrupt the remedy, and it seems to mess some, for whatever reason, with the informational field. That's only the big thing. With food, doesn't seem to matter. Coffee doesn't seem to antidote the remedies, that sort of stuff. But strong peppermint does seem to make a difference. So they were right on that front.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Barton Hart. Anyone who has any further questions, reach out Keystone Total Health. Thanks for joining us on Alt Psych Show today. Be well.
Take care, everybody.
Be well.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.